Okay, so this class is about data interpretation. All right. Um, if you've taken Math 1100 or Math 1110, especially Math 1110, you will note that this class will be a lot different from that type of class, which Math 1110 is a statistics course, but they tend to focus on your knowledge of formulas and that kind of thing. And in this class, anything that needs to be calculated will be calculated through SPSS. All right, and that's why you need to have access to SBS either through the VCL, the Virtual Computer Lab, or the hub that address that I gave you. If you wanted to rent it for 3 or 6 months, and then campus, obviously. Okay, so those are your three options for getting access to SPSS, and you must be able to get access to SPSS, and you must be able to download my videos in order to be successful in this class. All right. The main point, as I started off saying, that this is about interpretation. This is about how do you use data to answer questions. All right. How do you use data to answer questions? And those questions that we're going to seek out or try to answer will be related, obviously, to criminal justice topics. Okay. Um, the class is broken up into three modules. You have your univariate module, your bivariate module, and then your multivariate module. The univariate model looks at describing the characteristics of one variable. Can't spell today. Characteristics of one variable. The bivariate model looks at trying to describe associations between variables or among variables. Okay, so in other words, let me just finish this. And the multivariate looks at associations among among more than two variables. All right, and then I'll describe all these for you. All right, so with the univariate analysis, we're describing the characteristics of one variable, meaning, by itself, what do we know about that variable? All right, there's no association between, say, this variable and another variable. Anytime you're describing a univariate analysis and you make an association, or you say, in relationship to this other variable, you have left univariate analysis, and now you're in the world of bivariate analysis. So with the univariate analysis, for the most part, we'll be talking about frequencies, which is how many times does something appear. We'll be talking about percentages, which is the portion of the whole. We'll be looking at measures of central tendency, which is an aggregate way of looking at variables in terms of the mean, median, and the mode. And then we'll be looking at measures of dispersion. And our focus this semester will be on the standard deviation, and standard deviation, range, standard deviation, range. I think we'll look at skew and kurtosis, which are measure of dispersion, but they're mostly measures of how to of looking at the distribution of the variable that you're looking at how they look, the distribution actually looks. All right. So again, under univariate, we'll be focused on the frequencies, percentages, measures of central tendency, which included the mean, the median, and the mode. We'll be focused on measures of dispersions, particularly the standard deviation and the range. And then we'll be looking at the distribution of the way the distribution appears. Which are measures of dispersion, but it's a little bit different. All right. And so in terms of that, we'll be looking at skew and the kurtosis. All right. All right, and then so for bivariate analysis, we'll be looking at what's referred to as measures of association. And then particularly for those measures of association, we'll be focused on the lambda, the gamma, and your Pearson's R. All right. To do that, we'll be looking at, in terms of analysis, in SPSS, we'll be doing the crosstab, crosstabulations, and then the correlations. Okay, crosstabs correlations. All right. For for the multivariate analysis, looking at the relationship among more than two variables, we'll be looking at t-test, which is the testing hypothesis related to whether or not there's a mean difference between two categories of variables. We'll be looking at ANOVA, which is testing the mean difference of more than two categories in a particular variable. And I'll go over that in more detail as it becomes necessary. We'll also be looking at, and we'll probably actually be doing this first, looking at partial correlations. So I usually teach this as I'm teaching correlations, or the Pearson's R, as it's easily makes the stuff easier to understand at that point. T-test and then regression analysis. Now, because we're getting started somewhat late, the only thing that may be off the table this semester would be the regression analysis. Okay? Alrighty. Let me just go back over these t-tests just as let me go back over, starting over here, measure of association. So measure of association looks at the relationships between two variables. In other words, you might say, does parent attachment affect delinquency? And depending on your level of measurement, you would run either a lambda for nominal and nominal level measures, gamma for ordinal versus ordinal level measures, and Pearson's R, which is used for interval and ratio level measures. All right, and then you would run those things either through a crosstab or a correlation function and in SPSS. T-test looks at the relationship, whether or not that there's a mean difference between two categories in a particular variable as it relates to another variable. Say, for instance, you wanted to know if gender, if there's a difference between males and females related to your variable of delinquency. You're on a t-test, and then it will test the mean difference between those two categories in that particular variable. And If it's statistically significant, then the answer is yes, there is a mean difference. ANOVA does the same thing, but for more than two categories. Say, for instance, you wanted to look at race and delinquency, and you wanted to look at whites, blacks, and Hispanics, and see if there's a mean difference among those categories on delinquency. Then ANOVA, it would be your test that you would run. All right, and then partial correlations and regression analysis are two things that we'll discuss at a later date. All right.